All right, now it's time to see how close our basic shapes are. One thing I notice, and it's not that basic shapes are easier to draw, but it's easier to see mistakes before you've gone too far. I've noticed that the head here is tilted just slightly because one eye is slightly lower than the other. And so that creates a slight tilt up here as well. So I want to see if I can capture that. I'm going to rough in these other basic shapes. And I'm looking at the spaces between my shapes as well, the negative space. I'm looking at the overlaps of like the ovals. And it's fine to be sketchy. I like to make a lot of marks and then find the one it's easier for me to recognize the correct mark when I have a lot of marks made. Very scribbly. This is still the sketch phase, so we're not going for kind of a clean animation yet. Add the hand. Add the hand, and maybe add the sword. For things like swords, for static shapes like that, I would actually use the shape tool, but we'll learn that in one of our early exercises. And then cut out this bottom part, and I have to shorten this a little bit. Now, if you want to erase, you can use the eraser tool. Which is right here. And you control its brush size just like you do a regular brush. And you can get rid of marks that are misleading, but you don't need to worry too much about that. Now we're going to check your work by moving our reference and checking it against what we drew. All right? And remember, I drew mine twice just so you can see the difference. I drew it here, looking at the details, and I drew it here, looking at the basic shapes. And I can see that this space is a little bit too tall, but I'll let that go for now. So how do we check it? First, let's save our new file. So file, save, or save as, because we need to name it. But because it's a new file, even if we just did save, it would bring this up and it would have us title it. I'm going to call it Carl, and I'm going to call it Basic Shapes Exercise. And it's going to be a PSD file, Photoshop file, to the desktop. Command D to navigate to the desktop. And I can hit F11, make sure it saves. Because it's a larger resolution, it will take a little bit longer. So there it is. So now I have 3 files. Now I'm going to go to my reference file. I'm going to click on it so I can see its layers. I'm going to turn off my layer 1 basic shapes. I'm going to select my locked layer 0 background. And I'm going to use the most common tool in Photoshop. It's called the Move tool. It's at the very top. Now it looks like the cardinal directions. And I just click, drag, and drop to move that layer and make a copy of it into my new file. All right. Once you've done that, because we locked it in the original, it's locked here and it won't let me move it. So I need to unlock it. So I'm going to click on, once the layer is selected, I'm going to click on the lock to unlock it. And now it allows me to move that file around. I am going to tuck it into the corner. The problem is when it's over the top of my drawing, I can't see my drawing anymore. So the other thing you can move is you can move the order of the layers. So I'm going to move this down below layer 1. So now when I move it underneath my layers, it will go behind my drawing. And now to check my work, I need to resize this to make it match the size of my drawing, the higher resolution. And to do that, I'm on layer 3. I can go to Edit, Transform, Scale, but we'll almost never do that. Because this is something so common that this is another shortcut we need to learn. Command T is to free transform. So if you hit Command T, it will put a box around that layer. And then if you hold down Shift and drag from the corner of the box, it will scale it up without distorting it. If you don't hold down Shift, it will distort it. But if you want to lock its proportions, you hold down Shift. Right? Once it's the size you want, you can hit Return. And I've noticed that I've drawn mine at a slight angle, right? So not only can you change the size, but you can also hit Command T. And if you click outside of the box, you can rotate it. So I'm just going to rotate mine a little bit because it needs that. I'm going to try to make it match as closely as possible. I'm testing my basic shapes here. So if I were grading myself, I'd say the only place I got off was in this part of the head. You know, I tilted the eye line, but I didn't tilt the oval enough. But otherwise, I'm pretty spot on. Because if I had tilted that oval enough, I would have gotten the eye line right. And everything else maps pretty well. Notice how much better that is, just looking at basic shapes, than this. Right? Where his head is a lot taller, and the body's longer, and the sword is shorter, and the proportions in general don't match as well. Now, after testing it, and we're just using the Move tool here, then I might go back to my layer 3 and I might make corrections if I really worried about perfecting this. So I'm now just correcting where it went a little off, which is on this side of the head, which is more tilted. And I could erase the things that got in the way. Digital 2, because you're using the Intuos tablets, you can set the, and the default is that the back end of your stylus is the eraser tool. But you can set that to be any other tool you want. But it is really handy to just be able to flip it and use the eraser. All right, so those basic shapes are improved. Now I'm going to save them and upload them to our course page. Don't want to use the pencil tool, I want to use the paintbrush. All right. So those are what my basic shapes ended up being. And if I really wanted to understand what I liked about this character that I found, these basic shapes tell me a lot about how it operates. About the proportions, about the shapes, about the combinations. So if I was really inspired by this, and say I'm developing a cast of characters, I would look at those basic shapes and modify them a little bit and maybe create my own characters from it. Maybe I create a whole new medieval series of Care Bears to pitch to Cartoon Network, right? And I might start with these proportions, but then play with them. And instead of having stupid icons on their stomach, they'll have stupid icons on shields. It'll be like Game of Thrones with Care Bears. Lots of beheadings. I think Cartoon Network would like it. All right, anyway. How do we save this? How do we show what we want? We are going to save our full resolution file, because uploading low resolution stuff is kind of a waste of time. So this is what I want to see, and this is what I'll help you do. I want to see your drawing, whatever color it is, with your reference behind it. But then I want you to turn your reference down in opacity to only 50% on a white background. So it really will look like you just drew on a piece of tracing paper. And you got your basic shapes pretty spot on. And if you didn't get them spot on, that's just fine. We know what we need to practice, right? And this will help with our imaginative drawing And our second assignment will be a character design kind of assignment. All right. How do we save it now? Go to File, just hit Save. And it will be called Your Name Basic Shapes Exercise as a PSD. Check it. Now it's saved, it's uploaded, but it's a PSD file. And I cannot put PSD files, Photoshop files, onto the class portfolio page in PhotoBucket. You can't put PSD files to view online. They have to be flattened, right? So now we're going to save it again. And so in Photoshop, we say File, Save As. Because you have to say File, Save As whenever you're going to rename it or whenever you're going to change the format. I'm going to keep the same name, but I'm going to change the format from a Photoshop file to a JPEG file. JPEG is going to be the most common file type we use when we need the whole rectangle of our image to be filled in. JPEG is the best online image compression because it allows you to choose different quality settings. And so our quality settings should be between 10 and 12. And we should always, under the preview, you'll see the amount of memory it takes up. Anything we put up to PhotoBucket, we try to not have it be more than 5 megabytes. So right now my image is 2.6 megabytes. Even at 12, that's just great. So I say OK. I'm going to check it with F11. And now I have a JPEG version of it. And you can see the JPG that it added to the name. The difference is this takes up a ton of memory and can't be shown online. This takes up very little memory and can be shown online. But I can't open this up and get my layers and work on it anymore. For that, I need the PSD. So I call this a working type file. And for working type files, I label them with green. That's the one I want to go in and work on. For my online files, I usually label those as purple. And you can have your own system, but that just helps me. So now purple, I know, are flattened, and they're only good for posting. And I'm going to use purple this semester because it's like a bruise. This is something that's been beaten up. And now I shouldn't work on it anymore, right? I don't want to beat a dead horse. So this is only good for uploading now. All right, I can minimize Photoshop. And I have just enough time to do this. I'm going to open up Chrome, our default browser. I am going to type in PhotoBucket, or I can go from the links in the course. So you go to the course homepage. And you go to links. You'll see the link for PhotoBucket and the login information. But honestly, I would just go to PhotoBucket. And if you had logged in successfully last class, and everyone's doing what they should in this lab, you shouldn't have to log in again. And I would just bookmark it. So hit Command D and put it in your bookmarks bar. Home PhotoBucket. And then it will show up right there, so it's easy to get to. Now I go to Library, and we're going to upload our first exercise. And I'll come around and help you do this, so you don't need to rush. Okay, so for Digital Art 1, you click on the arrow next to Digital Art 1 to get the subfolders. We click on the arrow next to Digital Art 1 exercises. Come on, PhotoBucket. The other way you can get to it, if PhotoBucket's being slow, is just click on it and it will show you the subfolders here. And there's a Basic Shapes subfolder. You're going to click on that. You can see that's empty right now. It's waiting for our work. But if you want to see past student examples, that's a subfolder within the Basic Shapes folder. So I can click to upload, or I can simply drag and drop my JPEG right into here. But the reason I like to click to upload it is I navigate from the desktop. It shows me the only ones that are